Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com.
So we're here at Epic Live. This is in Grand Prairie, Texas, at basically Epic Central. We're in the Epic, next to Epic Waters, and they have this magical podcasting studio available to anybody who wants to come through. So if you live in Grand Prairie or around Grand Prairie and you need to record a podcast, man, this is the place. We got a team that none of you can see right now that are behind us that set everything up. We brought nothing, essentially. We accept ourselves and our beautiful personalities and our voices, and they set everything up for us. So I want to give a shout out to a great opportunity for those of you looking at doing what Randy and I are doing today and want to drop in and drop a podcast or start a podcast. You have got a great opportunity in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at a beautiful site, well put together and easy to record.
Yeah, it's great, except for people like you who are easily distracted because we got class.
But they have curtains.
We could have, we could have pulled the curtains, but I said no, let's don't do it. So we made Lisa sit with her back against the wall. Yeah, the minute and if nobody's come to the Epic, man, if you're in Grand Prairie and you haven't been to the Epic, then what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
sure.
It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. I mean, I haven't even been to the water thing next door, which is basically, it's Great Wolf without the hotel.
That's right. They have a lot of, this is just one of the unique features. They got a theater in the back. They have got a sound studio, if I remember as well, where you can record. So they have so many fabulous opportunities. If you haven't had a chance to come here, just ask for a quick tour. They will show you around, lots of opportunities. And I'm glad that they said, hey, I said, we need to record our podcast today. And good old Megan and CMO, Megan Mahan, the deputy city manager, said, well, go to Epic. They have a podcasting studio. Let's use it. And I said,
yeah, and we walked
okay.
Past it. I've never opened the door to it, but, as a longtime podcaster, I was always fascinated by it. It's great. We got professional lighting. We got professional microphones, and it looks like it's a 3-mic setup. It's 3 microphones set up, 2 cameras. They may add more. So, yeah,
use
why
what's
wouldn't
available.
why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? If especially if you're a Grand Prairie citizen, you're going to get special treatment. So, yeah, you should come check it out. So it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm glad we're doing today's show here. We may have to start coming here and doing this all the time.
We may have to do it more often when you're in town, Randy, and you're not in Arkansas, and I'm not in Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's that. All right, so we get asked all the time, what should we talk about, and are we open to suggestions? So the other day I'm having a conversation, said, sure. What do you want to talk about? Said morale. I said, okay, well, it's a broad
big
subject.
topic.
Yeah, big topic. So he says, well, we've got bad news, so we're going to have to deliver at some point to the troops. What the bad news isn't all that important to the context. I said, okay. Worried about what that bad news, how that bad news is going to impact the workforce and how that will negatively impact the morale. So would you guys be willing to talk about that? So I hit you up about it, and you said, yeah, you'd be willing to talk about it. So there you go.
Yeah, so we've, the biggest challenge I can remember in working through really hard conversations that impacted us citywide. That's where my head kind of went to, because it sounds like this could potentially be an organization-wide issue, not just a
Correct.
Small department. Fair?
Yep.
So the one challenge we had, and I'm sure any of our listeners obviously had as well, was back in the recession. I'm talking about the 2008, 2010-ish, 11-ish time frame, when there were a lot of organizational challenges. It didn't matter if you were private sector, public sector, small business. Budget became extremely challenging and tight. For cities, like many of our listeners, we have ad valorem taxes, we have sales tax, all of which were substantially down. We had many foreclosures happening at the time, as were around the nation. And so I go to that example when I think about we had to deliver bad news and the way that at the time we went through it strategically as a team. For us, it started at the top. It started with our city manager at the time getting us together as a leadership team, talking about budget. We have got to take action. We feel it's imminent. This is before the recession hit. He was very visionary, and he said, I feel like we're coming into some challenging times. We need to start taking a look at our budget. And he started getting the entire leadership team, which was at the time probably about 19 of us, involved in, okay, what does that look like? And it started as, here's the steps we're going to start with. We're going to take a look at our current budget, and then we need to start working that down by, and he gave us a percent, let's say 10%. And he said, 10% means I'm not talking coffee. I'm not talking your creamers. I'm talking we need meat. You need to look at services. You need to look at everything that we can do. And if you can give more than 10, but I want to understand impact. So we all started working as a team, gathering that. This is going through about a 6-month window now. We're working through these issues. We're evaluating them. We're submitting them. And then seeing what that saves us in dollars. We started going through that, recession actually starts hitting. We actually start seeing foreclosures happening. We actually start seeing sales tax. People are no longer shopping. They're no longer going out. Money is no longer available on extras. And so as we move through this process, he said, okay, he started giving us updates. And then he started, which was I think the most important piece of all this, crafting a message with our marketing team. We need to start advising not just this leadership team, but where we're at as a city, and to do it as positively as he can, giving bad news of where we're at, because he wanted transparency. And I thought, I learned a lot through that. I'd never been through anything like this before and I've been 28 years now at the city. But at that time, he crafted a message with the marketing team. So I saw him strategically work. He wasn't the expert in the room. He asked for guidance on what should we say, how should we say it. We reviewed it and kind of added comments. So he started getting the message out to employees that we may be facing budget challenges. Here's what we are looking at. It's going to impact all of us. And if you have ideas, bring them forward. So he not only solicited from the leadership team, he started soliciting down through the troops, and ideas started flowing in. Through this period, we started obviously making substantial cuts. But as with many people during the recession, we did get rid of things like coffee. We started minimizing training unless it was essential, like for CEUs or things you had to have to retain, like a city attorney needs credits. There's certain people that have to have it for their jobs to remain credentialed. Those stayed. We started getting rid of other things. Then, as he came back, he said, okay, appreciated it. And he gave us an update. We saved, let's say it's 10 million. Not enough. I'm projecting we're going to need this much by next year, and I want us going into the year with some savings. And so then it started getting into, the first stuff was, I call it the easy stuff. It's easy to get rid of coffee and say we're not going to provide coffee anymore. It's easy to get rid of, I can't remember. It was just different stuff that I call it the easy bucket. It was, okay, that wasn't very painful. That should be good. And then he said, not enough. Now we need to look at all of our services. And what do you need to either keep services at the same level or to reduce services? Tell me impact, like I mentioned earlier. So then it started getting a little bit more critical. And he was working at the same time with marketing to get that next message out. And I thought it was very strategic in the fact that he was, I call it giving nuggets. He's slowly giving nuggets, so there's nobody surprised as we're moving through this. And he said, we've done a great job. Thank you for all the ideas. We're continuing to look at those ideas. Now, here's what we have done. Thank you, everybody. We've saved X amount. We are digging in further. Anticipating this is going to continue based on the nation's, because news was out at this time. You're seeing this all over the country. And he said, I'm anticipating it's going to worsen, so we are going to dig deeper, and we are now looking at services, and, and he kind of staged it, and I'm summarizing, but the messages weren't coming out daily. They were coming out about every 3 months, maybe.
Now describe morale though through this process. So morale at the beginning of this versus morale now in your narrative.
Well, so at the beginning of it was, I think it was okay. Sounds good because nobody felt anything.
Okay.
As it moved along, you started having not only employees being alerted that, okay, we're doing more, but now they're also feeling impact in their families because people are starting to either lose jobs. It's getting tighter. Salaries being reduced. At this time, I don't know if you remember furloughs.
So people are losing jobs. You just mean
Not
in the
our
market.
jobs. I'm talking about just in their families. They're starting to see
Got it.
parents laid off
Sure.
or stock markets crashing, and their families are starting to slowly get impacted by the recession at that point. My family, too. Before it ever hit the city, my dad had lost money in the stock market that he had been saving for 30 years, and he was kind of panicking because he was 2 years out from retirement. So it was just like, I'm starting to see this impacting me and my family, and other families are starting. So at the time I was in HR. So naturally, I knew at the time it was Tom Hart. I knew him well. We had a great relationship, and employees were starting to come to me, and directors were coming to me going, hey, we're having these challenges. So I fed that up and said, hey, this is becoming a concern. You might want to consider that in your strategy session. So that's one area I would relate to anybody going through something hard. You don't be the expert in the room. Get with the people around you. What are you hearing? And if there is a consistency in what you are hearing amongst many, that's probably real. If it's one person that's got a major issue and that's the only time you're hearing it, I wouldn't focus on that yet. I would focus on the common things that you're hearing. And he did that. So morale is moving from thanks for keeping us informed to, okay, things are getting real. And then the question became, what is going on at the city? He's communicating, but the reality became, what is happening? And people start questioning, are we going to lose our jobs?
How bad is this going to get?
Yeah, and this, back in the day, I'm sure every organization, because this was nationwide. It might have been global for all I know. But it's happening everywhere. So we're just navigating it with our culture and what we know, right? This happening to us. At that time, he started asking us to dig deeper. He said, we've gotten rid of all the extras that we can get rid of. We now need to look at services. That took another few months, it seems like. It seems like this evolved over like a 2-year window, if I remember, because the first year was planning for it. The second year it happened, the recession hit. And then the third year was recovery. But as we moved through it, we got to an unfortunate point. Well, we were fortunate and unfortunate in a couple ways. We were more fortunate than most cities because we had planned for it strategically well ahead of time. But then what happened is we had to start getting into the positions. And what we did first, like I'm sure many, if you haven't thought about it, I would encourage you to, whether you're private or public in our listening audience. We got into, okay, we're freezing positions and we're freezing anything that's vacant, doing everything we can. And at that time, the message was to the employees, we are doing everything we can as a city to not touch our people. You are our most valuable asset. And here's what we are doing next. We're freezing positions. It is going to get hard. Please understand, we have to do this. You're going to have to be doing more with less. And it was just kind of this transparent message of we're in this together and we're going to have to navigate it together. But I believe in my heart, people really appreciated, as difficult as things were, the transparency from the top. There's a level of security that comes with hearing from the top down. And then at the time I was a director, I appreciated hearing that. And I met with my troops. This was a message from me. And again, I don't know you, Randy, you've been a CEO, so you may have a perspective as well. For me, those messages were in person. I gathered up my department. It wasn't an email any longer as the messages got tougher. If you're in a global corporation, you may not be able to do in person, but we physically went around and I would talk to people saying, okay, here's what we know now. And I think if I recall, Tom actually went to groups and let them question him. What is going on? What do you know? And hearing the same message as what was stated in email communication or letters. That to me was a comfort. It was scary at the same time because I'd never faced this in my career, and I'm in HR, and we're a group at the time that is taking care of people. That's our business. So it became challenging at that point. However, morale, so starting to get concerned, but we haven't touched people yet. We've frozen people. Then of course, as we went along, we had to start cutting services, and it's all in perspective how you look at it. At the time, I would say for many it was painful, but I believe as a city, you also become better because you're reevaluating what's critical and what maybe you didn't need as much or could re-envision and do differently. And through change comes good too. So I think through pain, we had some pain points which were real, but we also became better and stronger as an outcome in the recovery phase. Right?
So when you reduce services, is there a reduction of workforce at that point?
At that time, typically if we reduce services, we were trying to tie them to the frozen positions. And we tried to make sure, for instance, we couldn't necessarily, your waste management services, which is a huge contract, collects garbage. We can't necessarily cut days. Right? You still have the same amount of garbage. So there's things like that we had to evaluate. When Tom had us do impact, which I thought was creative, it fed those making decisions. I wasn't necessarily in the room for those at the time since I was director level. But as we fed it up, they had the information on here's what would impact, and they could start prioritizing the cuts. Also, the dollars help.
So does the organization at this point know that the reduction in services, we're going to try to tie that to the frozen positions?
I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember that specifically. I just remember his conversation out through marketing's help were maybe one or two paragraphs. He tried to boil it down to very layman's, simplistic.
Keep it tight. Real.
Here's what we are doing. Thank you for your feedback. If you have anything else in mind, don't be afraid to share. Everybody's opinions count. It was that kind of messaging. Oh. And he always kept us informed of what we cut and where we're at. Not by line item, but just generally. Right. We've been able to cut services. We've been able to cut frozen positions, which saved us X. Well, then it gets into obviously where we had to start looking at people at some point. The challenge for that is that's a message you can't necessarily send out, right? Back then. This is seems like that happened around 2010-ish. And what he did, which I again appreciate, is he said, now I need creativity. What are we not looking at that we should look at? What have we never done that we might want to consider? Get your creative thinking caps on and bring it to the table. And so what we did at the time.
Now, was that aimed at the communication? Let's be creative in how we're going to say.
That was to his leadership team.
Okay.
Leadership
but
team.
Was that creativity to continue to make these cuts and solve this problem? Or creativity and
before
our
we
messaging?
had to get to people.
Okay.
The issue was before we have to get to people, he took every step. His biggest communication in all my years, much like our current leadership is our people are our greatest asset.
Yeah.
And we take care of our own first. I mean, that was always his message, and that remains the message today.
The priority was let's cut this low-hanging fruit. Now let's cut more, and now let's get
now we're pruning the tree.
Now let's get even more creative and keep cutting.
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so he said, what are we not thinking about that we need to think about?
Okay.
And so one of the things we came up with at the time that I had to do a lot of exploration on my own, because I said, what if we did some kind of early retirement incentive? I had heard it at a conference. I had heard, I believe it might have been somewhere in Arizona that had done one. And so I called them and I said, hey, I heard y'all may have done this. What didn't go well, what did go well, and what are lessons learned, because I want to bring that to the table. I don't know if it'll be considered. And so they gave me those lessons learned. I took it, went to our city attorney's office, said, here's what they did, what didn't work. They didn't get sued, which is good. They minimized damage, which is great. In other words, to employees. Mm-hmm. But it allowed people an out with a financial incentive.
Yep.
Before you had to cut them. And so what we did back then is this, we did an incentive. If anybody's considering that, especially city governments, I don't know where we're at or what's coming in this nation right now. But if you're ever in that position to consider it, what we did is met with an outside attorney and our current city attorney's office and understood the kind of notices we had to give and all that good stuff. Developed these early retirement incentives. And then we had to make sure we didn't have a mass exodus, that we didn't get more than we needed.
Right.
So we had to create numbers around that of, we can't have more than, like public safety. You can't have all your police and fire exit.
Right.
Because they typically have the highest years, just by the nature of the system. So we created criteria around it. And then ultimately they had to submit applications of interest. And then we could figure out what of those could we accept. And we told them, we cannot guarantee it, but we had open forums of, they're like, what does this mean? What if we don't pick it? And then our position gets cut? Do we then get the incentive? And we had to explain all that. Those are hard choices, but we basically said, we don't know what the future looks like. We need to see what this gains for us. And we can't tell you, if you don't accept it, will your position be ultimately impacted, because we do not yet know as an organization. So we tried to be very transparent, but we had sessions and we met with the spouses. And we told them, Tom said, you need to be completely transparent, give them what you can and what you know, and we did. And that helped. And so we gained millions of dollars, I don't remember how much it was, in people exiting early. One lesson learned, we lost a lot of knowledge, because the ones eligible, they had to be eligible to retire.
Right.
The ones that walked out of the door took 30 years worth of knowledge with them.
Yeah.
So on the downside, that's the risk you lose. But on the upside, they were our highest paid positions, many of them that wanted to retire, took the early retirement incentive, and then we felt better because we could give them an incentive at the time that we had reviewed, legally able to. We knew it was helping their families. So that gives you a little piece as an organization.
Financial win for everybody.
Yes, for those that could do it and were in position. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we had to RIF very few. If I remember right, it might have been less than 20 ultimately to get to our final number. But everybody around us, I'm telling you, they were taking furloughs, cutting leave, cutting sick time, cutting vacation time. Hundreds of people. You see private sector, thousands of people. My dad came from EDS, which is now Hewlett Packard. I think they released 7,000 people.
Yeah, it was death by 1,000 cuts for most people, where you guys were just, let's just do it and be done.
But I attribute that success to the strategy up front, to not waiting too late, to anticipating what you see coming. I don't know how he stayed informed. I can't speak to that. But he had wisdom with those around him to know it is coming, it's imminent, and we better start prepping now and not waiting. And I appreciated he had us research. Every city around us was doing furloughs. Every city around us. And he said, I'm not willing to do that. Go. And he asked me, and I didn't know anything about furloughs. He said, I want you to go explore it. And I want you to understand, what does that cost us? And 5 years later, what does that mean to us? And those that furloughed had a horrible time trying to then pay for leave to give back. 5 years later, almost unaffordable.
Yeah.
So it was just an interesting dynamic. But as we talk about this, and as your listener asked you about morale, all of that to be said, the main thing is, I found transparency counts where you can be, one, to address morale, to do it timely. Let them know where you're at and let them know where you're going with what you can. And then third, when it comes down to hard times, he explained it. He was not afraid to get out there, and he said, this is going to get harder. He basically said, do everything we can. He got involvement and engagement from the employees themselves on ideas, which we put in some, I forgot who it was, but somebody came up with library books. They said, we order all these books. We weren't even thinking about library books. Was it a ton? It was a couple $100,000, I think, at the time. So it counted in a bucket. When you start adding $100,000 at a time, you get to $1 million pretty fast. So it's little ideas that count, and trusting those around you, just keeping people informed. And then when the cuts came and we had to do them, of course, those we couldn't give them advance notice. That was probably the hardest part for all of us. I had to do every one of those personally. With the directors and with the people. But what I committed to do after the fact with leadership's approval is I tried to find them other positions that were not what we call general fund that we could fund, and I tried to find other places that had openings, getting them connected with resources that could place them, and promised them if we had an opportunity to hire back, they would be first on our list. And most of them didn't come back. I'm sure there was challenges there, hard feelings, whatever. But we had to cut so few. I was appreciative, and I think that's all in the foresight of leadership, knowing where we are and where we're going.
What did the post-mortem? So after the dust has settled and you guys are in year 3 or even after year 3, and you've rebounded or you're in the process of rebounding, what did the leadership post-mortem look like?
So for us, a lot of people did come to us asking, one, what we did and how we came out of it. Because at that time, and I forgot to mention that, Tom was still able, he found one-time money to give the people that were here that helped us with these solutions. And I think it might have been like $1,000 at the time, but we had one-time money, which doesn't make sense to many. But he's like, I still want to do something for the people that are staying with us through this. And he gave a one-time, what he called a lump sum. And everybody's like, how can you do that? And he said, well, we still have a budget to manage, and my people are everything to us. And he found a way to do that. We were the only city that I'm aware of that gave anything.
It's a big symbol.
Yeah, a bit, and I think he just counted that in and created that. But after the fact, it was then, okay, we're going to start adding positions back, but it's going to be slow, and we need to prioritize. And we just started submitting, just like we did on the front end to cut, we submitting what we needed on the back end to recover, and we started prioritizing those, and it just slowly worked over time. And I think it seems like it might have been 2011 and 2012 we were recovered. And there were a lot of cities around us that were not, that had pain points for many years following that. Some cities I heard didn't give any kind of increase for up to 7 years. So I don't know their position and their finances, nor that they did anything wrong. They may have just had a different sales tax percentage. They might have had a different ad valorem tax percentage. We don't know anybody's individual circumstances, but we know what we had. And that's what we worked with. And I always appreciate at the time that our leadership team at CMO, again, I attribute that to similar what it is now. We have a leadership team that doesn't think they know everything and are making all the decisions. We are listening to others, getting insight, and making decisions based on knowledge we gain. And that was what was critical to us. Well, and hopefully that helps the listener.
Yeah, and clearly we can't share, as leaders, we can't share all the bad news. And you can't always be so open and transparent.
Correct.
You know, you had a national for sure issue that was going on, and everybody knew it.
And everybody was feeling it.
Yeah. If it's something that's more unique to your organization, what advice would you have? If there's bad news coming, maybe that bad news up to and including a reduction in workforce, and to manage that morale, how?
You know, that for me at the time, the biggest thing that I found in that lesson learned and I did it with my staff, because I asked for wisdom for those around me. I had mentors myself, and I talked to our leadership team above me in CMO, and I said I need to tell my staff, but I need to make sure I'm telling them what I can tell them, and it's not against what you're suggesting. And what I learned is that staff wanted to hear from me even if I couldn't give them an answer. That is the biggest thing that I found. I said, here's what I do know, and then they would ask questions, like many. Are we going to lay people off? And I said, you know what? I can't answer that because nobody has that predictive model in front of us. I just don't know. We're doing everything we can to avoid that. And that was fact. And I said, you know, you say that's your story and you're sticking to it, but that was the truth. And that's what counted to me, is just being transparent with my team. Were they worried? Yes. Was I worried? Yes. We all were in this together, and that's what I just kept saying. Just do everything you can to support our employees. We are HR at the time. They are going to come to you because we are that kind of hub. We're all about people, and they're going to rely upon us, and I need your strength. And I need your courage to lead us through this and to lead our teams through it, because they all need us right now. We need one another. And I felt like we did that really well as an organization. We stayed informed. The message was the same and consistent. Different departments weren't hearing different things. We all were moving forward on a path that was aligned, and I think that's what counted the most.
Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, a city government leadership podcast. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. Be well, do good, grow great. The website is growgreat.com.